Hello, I am the Prime Minister of this side, and our motion is that we will impose sanctions or on politicians who don't fulfill campaign promises. Without further ado, move on straight to our argument. My argument is the increase of accountability. We believe that our premise is the proof that by creating sanctions, it increases accountability in terms of keeping the politicians' campaigns protecting the government from being corrupt. Our mechanisms are as follows. First, it creates real consequences for failure. Without sanctions, politicians can ignore promises and with little to no cost. Sanctions introduce tangible consequences such as fines, loss of privilege, or limits on re-election, which makes politicians think carefully before making and breaking commitments. Accountability only exists when there's something meaningful at stake. Second, it forces politicians to justify their actions publicity. When a promise is not fulfilled, sanctions require politicians to explain why, whether due to budget constraints, political oppositions, or unforeseen crises. This process increases transparency and allows voters to judge whether the failure was justified due to negligence or dishonesty. As our policy states, when these politicians can't fulfill their campaigns in less than 10 years, then they will not be able to to be a politician again. But furthermore, the harmed citizen will choose what punishment they will get. Third, it discourages unrealistic and dishonest promises. Knowing that broken promises will be punished and cancelled out, it encourages politicians to keep their campaign honest. They are more likely to set achievable goals, including clear timelines, and avoid vague or exaggerated claims. This leads to more responsible campaigning and a much more trusted government. Fourth, and our last argument mechanism is it empowers voters beyond election cycles. Elections happen every few years, which gives politicians long periods without direct accountability. Sanctions provide an ongoing check on power, ensuring leaders remain answering without their campaigns and promises. It's not just a ballot box existing. And as our policy states, when these politicians can't fulfill their campaigns in less than 10 years, then they will not be able to run again. And now, moving on to my arguments. First argument is that because the politicians will not should not fail while doing their promise, they will set a very safe goal, and they'll try their best to finish the job safely, fast, and smoothly, making development faster but safer too. Second impact is higher quality of life. Because politicians want promises that the citizens need, but safe, they promise they promise to resolve small but common problems, making promises that increases this quality of life for citizens. And my second argument is protects voters from manipulations. My promise is that we should prove that through telling these politicians that if they fake their campaigns, then it takes them from creating unrealistic campaigns. Our mechanisms are as follows. First, it prevents politicians from exploiting voters' hopes and fears. Politicians often target their campaigns on voters' emotion and benefits, such as fear, cause of poverty, or insecurity by making promises they know they can't keep. Sanctions reduce this exploitation by stopping politicians from using falsehood as a tool to win votes. Second, it reduces misinformation during campaigns. Unrealistic promises distort voters' understanding of what is actually possible. Sanctions push politicians to provide accurate, unrealistic, and realistic policy proposals, ensuring that voters make informed choices rather than being misled and misled by unrealistic and fake propaganda. And my last mechanism is it ensures constant based on truth, not just on decision of these people. Democracy relies on informed consent. If voters elect leaders based on false promises, their consent is manipulated. Sanctions ensure political consent is earned honestly, protecting the integrity of the voting process. And my impacts are as follows. First, because politicians have to make all promises come true, they decrease their amount of promises, but leave the ones that are crucially needed for the citizens, making the citizens more happy about it. Second, impact, it makes politicians set real goals. Because the politician could get a sanction if they do not keep the promise, it makes the politicians set actually real and possible goals. So the project will go on efficiently, fastly, and smoothly. And these are the reasons why I'm proud to propose. Thank you.
Today, our side firmly argues that we should not impose sanctions on politicians of unfulfilled campaign promises. We all want leaders to be accountable, but this policy is blunt, harmful tool that distorts the purpose of governance, punishes adaptability, and weakens the very democracy it claims to strengthen. Let's explain our position step by step. We believe politics is not about rigidly checking off a list of campaign pledges. It's about navigating messy, unpredictable realities to serve the public good. Campaign promises are aspirational visions, not binding legal contracts. They are made before a politician faces the chaos of office, shifting economic conditions, unforeseen crisis, or changing community needs. So, core argument one: campaign promises depend on unforeseeable realities. Sanctions punish leaders for things beyond their control. When politicians run for office, they lay out plans based on the information and circumstances of the moment. But once in power, they confront countless variables no one can predict. A sudden economic downturn that drains government funds, a natural disaster that demands emergency spreading, or an opposition party that blocks key legislation in parliament. A promise to build new schools, for example, might fail because of neglect, but because a flood or public health crisis requires redirecting resources to save life. Sanctioning leaders for these unavoidable setbacks does not hold them accountable. It punishes them for the inherent uncertainty of governing, a challenge no leader can escape. So politicians will stop making bold, ambitious promises and instead only offer safe, vague pledges that are easy to keep. This leads to stagnation as no one dares to tackle big, important problems for fear of facing sanctions. Core argument two: sanctions replace responsible governance with promise keeping, destroying political courage. Good leadership often requires making tough, unpopular decisions that makes campaign promises for the sake of the people. A politician might promise to cut taxes, but if a national security emergency or public health disaster demands increased spreading, raising taxes or become the responsible choice. Sanctions would pressure leaders to prioritize keeping their campaign a word over doing what's right. They might stick to harmful tax cuts if it defunds hospitals or force through a flawed policy just to avoid being sanctioned. This turns governance into a box-ticking exercise, not a pursuit of the public good. In short term, policy decisions are driven by fear of sanctions, not evidence or community needs. Core argument three: sanctions weaponize campaign promises, deepening political division and gridlock. Sanctions would turn policy disagreements into punitive weapons. Opposing parties would use unfulfilled promises as an excuse to sanction rivals, even when the failure was due to legitimate, unavoidable challenges. For example, a party might sanction a leader for failing to pass a climate bill, ignoring that the opposition itself blocked the bill in the this shifts the focus from solving shared problems to punishing political enemies, turning parliament into a battlefield of retribution instead of collaboration. In short term, political gridlock worsens. Parties spend more time trying to sanction each other than working together on issues like healthcare, education, or infrastructure. So we all want politicians to be accountable, but sanctions on unfulfilled campaign promises the wrong way to achieve it. Today, vote for the side that protects effective, adaptable leadership and demands democracy from counterproductive punishments. Vote con. Thank you.
Before I get into my argument, I would like to refute to the first speaker of opposition. So the first speaker of opposition said that sanctions may discourage politics from making ambitious promises, but ambition does not conflict with accountability, and sanctions encourage politicians to make realistic evidence-based promises, like helping the society, improving governance quality, and without accountability, ambitious promises are meaningless anyways. Prop ensures promises translate into action benefiting citizens, and the alternative world is a world of empty rhetoric, which is worse for the democracy than incentivizing responsible ambition. So, secondly, sanctions will create a culture of risk or risk aversion. Sanctions incentivize responsible governments, not fear. Politicians can still innovate and promise and propose ambitious policies. They are just encouraged to be realistic and evidence-based. Without sanctions, politicians are free to make empty populist promises, which is far more harmful than calculated risk-taking. So now I'll go into my first argument. So my argument is that strengthens democracy and public trust. So the premise is that politicians are elected based on the promises that they make during campaigns. These promises form a binding social contract with the electorate. When politicians fail to deliver, they betray public trust, weaken democratic legitimacy, and undermine accountability. Imposing sanctions create tangible consequences, ensuring that elected officials act in line with the mandate that they were giving, ultimately strengthening governance and democracy. So I will again repeat the policy, which is that when these politicians can't further their campaign in less than 10 years, then they will not be able to run to be a politician again. But furthermore, the harmed citizens will choose what punishment they get. So my first myth is that is about transparency and public reporting. So an independent oversight body systematically trades campaign promises versus actual policy outcomes. Annual promise fulfillment reports rank politicians based on percentages and significant fulfilled responses. And reports include clear metrics such as economic, social, or environmental impact of unfulfilled promises, so voters can access tangible results. Second, my second mech is about electoral consequences. Politicians who fail to deliver on a critical threshold of promises may face restrictions on running for office for a set period, preventing repeated exploration of voter trust. Mandatory disclosure of unfulfilled promises during campaign allows voters to make informed comparisons between candidates, directly linking performance to electoral opportunity, and encourages politicians to prioritize achievable and evidence-based policies over these empty populist promises, as failing promises now carries political costs. And my last make is about legal financial penalties. So politicians face fines or reductions in salaries, allowance proportional to the scale and importance of broken promises, but these are mostly chosen by the citizens who were hurt. So my first impact is about empowers voters and restores public trust. So this means that citizens gain access to clear, measurable information about politicians' performance, so their vote directly rewards accountability rather than rhetoric. And knowing that broken promises carry consequences reassures the electorate, reducing cynicism and political disengagement. And lastly, it encourages long-term civic engagement, and voters monitor politicians actively, participate more in elections, and demand higher standards from representatives. My second impact is about how it improves governance quality. So politicians are incentivized to propose feasible evidence-based policies rather than the empty populist promises, reducing waste of public resources. It encourages long-term planning and prioritization of policies that have real social impact, and it cultivates a culture of responsibility. Which means that political offices becomes linked to delivery, not just record, improving overall institutional performance. So on the competitor side, why does the prop win? So prop wins because of four main reasons: media security, moral appeals, and sanctions, and recall elections all fail to guarantee accountability. Media is biased, selective, or ignored, and ethical appeals rely on voluntary compliance, and recalls are rare, reactive, and costly. Sanctions, by contrast, are systematic, enforceable, and proactive, creating continuous accountability through a politician's term. All loses because they have broken promises and cynicism, because without sanctions, politicians can ignore promises without consequences, and voters become cynical, disengaged, and distrustful of the political system. And this is why I am so proud to propose. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Now, today we are talking about whether we should pick Today the proposition first, maybe promises fail or reasons politicians can't control. Imagine a candidate promised to build a new school, but then a big earthquake hits and government have to spend all the money on fixing roads and hospitals instead. I think it's not fair to punish them for something they couldn't stop. The thing there is full of surprises, like natural disasters. Sanctions could punish politicians for things they can't change, which it isn't right. Second, sanctions would make politicians afraid to make bold promises. If they know they'll get punished for not keeping every single promise, they'll only make safe, boring ones like "I will pick up trash in the park." They don't try to solve big problems like climate change or poverty.
Why?
Sorry, later. Because those are hard and might not work out. We want leaders to take risks to make our lives better, not leaders who play it safe to avoid punishment. We already have a better way to hold politicians accountable. Elections. If a politician breaks their promises, we can just vote them out next time. That's the most fair and democratic way to do it. Sanctions are like a harsh rule that takes away our power as voters, instead of letting us decide who stays or goes. A small group of people will decide who get punished. That's now how a free society works. Sanctions would divide our country even more. Politics is already full of arguments. If we want to punish politicians every time they don't keep a promise, both sides will attack each other non-stopping. We need leaders who work together, not fight with each other. Sanctions would make it harder for politicians to compromise and fix problems, which is the opposite of what we need. So let's think. Sanctions might sound like a good way to make politicians keep their promise, but they'll actually make our government more weak and less brave and more divided, separated. The better choice is to trust voters to hold politicians accountable, because that's how democracy is supposed to work for us. Thank you.
Judge. Right now, opposition side is saying that the politicians will only give boring and safe campaigns. Isn't this what the society actually needs? Not putting the country on risk and on thin lines. So proud to propose. So going straight into refutations, they mentioned how we should not punish the politicians for things that they cannot change, such as natural disasters. Yes, we agree on this. For example, natural disasters are something no one can actually control. So in this circumstance, we will not punish them, but only we have two alternatives, not only punishing them, but only the ones who create lies about what they would do. And second of all, we literally give them a policy of saying that we'll give them a 10-year span of doing it. A natural disaster doesn't take over. I don't think it doesn't take over 5 years to prepare a certain place. Their policy should be working even that in that circumstance. And the third alternative is that it's such a minor case that natural disasters will happen exactly in the politicians' like working span. Also, they said that you want the politicians and citizens to work together. Yes, government side definitely agrees on this point, but this only happens when these politicians and the government and citizen is trusting each other. And on opposite side, this is not happening. So this is only happening on government side. Therefore, so proud to propose. Going straight into the first clash on which side should the politician be taking responsibility. Opposition side says that because if there are unplanned situations, they don't have to take responsibility. Sanctions are not the right way to achieve it. We can make them take responsibility on what happened naturally. This is why government side has a clear policy. We clearly stated our policy that when these politicians can't fulfill their campaigns in less than 10 years, then they will not be able to run as a politician again. But furthermore, the harmed citizens will choose what punishment they will get. This is why we literally need a policy and policy motions. Second alternative, opposition side does not have the alternative solution, which also means that they don't have a specific policy. Just leaving these harmed citizens there, losing trust in the government, which is bad, severely bad, as our second speaker, as our DPM stated. Whereas on government side, these harmed citizens that believe in this government ensures consent is based on truth, not just on deception from these people. Democracy relies on informed consent. If these voters elected leaders based on these false promises that are not going to be obviously kept, that these voters don't know, these consent is manipulated. Sanctions ensure political consent is earned honestly, protecting the integrity of the voting process. It makes the politicians actually set real goals, because the politicians could get a sanction if they do not keep the promise. At the end of the day, this is going to actually give them incentive to keep their promises and actually make realistic goals. Even though, as the opposition say, there are like boring things, that's what we want, as I mentioned, because we don't want the country to be in like a really thin line and be like risk our country, right? So the project will go on eventually, as our PM speaker mentioned. The weighing faster on our side, we actually get faster development, because these politicians have to visually show the promises being done, and they have to push the project to be well done, should not fail doing their promise, and they it's also going to lead to safer development because they try their best to finish this job safely and fast and smoothly so that the voters can vote for them again, not worrying. Opposition just simply does not have an alternative for the people who are harmed. The second clash on which side creates a better quality of life. Government side says that because the politicians want promises that the citizens need but are safe, they promise to resolve a small common problems but make promises that increase the quality of life of citizens. This also increases trust of citizens overall, making such a better country and state. Whereas on the opposite side, the second speaker has mentioned, without these sanctioned, politicians are free to empty populist promises, which can far more harm the calculated risk taking. Is this actually what a strong country wants? No, obviously not. So at the end of the day, on the government side, we are the only side who actually gives the politicians an incentive to keep their promises with the citizens, increasing trust, making a less corrupt government. Again, at the end of the day, because we want these politicians to be responsible and take over their words, we will not be we set a policy to or they take their responsibility when these politicians fail to fulfill their campaign less than 10 years, which is a really long time, then they will not be able to run as a politician again. But furthermore, the harmed citizens will choose what punishment they will get. I think this is a very, as proposition side, and I think opposition side should agree on this, because these harmed citizens are the ones who got harmed and harmfully impacted. So they should be the ones who are gonna get back on the politicians and see what is gonna happen. So proud to propose. Thank you.
Our side strongly believes we shouldn't punish politicians when we can't keep our campaign promises. We all want leaders who are responsible, but sanctioning them for unfulfilled pledge is like using a sledgehammer to fix a pencil. It's too harsh, causes more harm, and breaks the things we need most, like good governance and first, politicians often can't keep promises because of unaccepted problems, things they couldn't predict. Imagine a mayor promises to build a new community park, but then a big storm hits, destroying roads and schools. The mayor has to use the park money to fix the broken roads so people can get to work and school. Is that the mayor's fault? No. Sanctioning them for this would be unfair. If we punish, later. If we punish leaders for dealing with surprises, they'll stop making bold plans like fighting pollution or improving schools. Instead, they only say safe, boring things that don't help anyone because they are scared of getting in trouble. Second, good leaders sometimes have to break promises to do the right thing. Let's say a politician promises to lower taxes, but then a new disease spreads, and hospitals need more money to help sick people. The politician has to raise taxes to save lives, even though it breaks their promise. That's not being irresponsible. That's being smart. Later. That being smart and kind. If we sanction them for this, leaders will choose to keep their promises instead of doing what's best for everyone. That they might let hospitals run out of money just to avoid punishment, and that's bad for all of us. Third, sanctions will make political fights worse. Imagine two teams in class disagree on a project. Instead of working it out later, working it out, one team punishes the other for not doing things their way. That's what sanctions would do. Opposing parties will use unfulfilled promises as an excuse to attack each other, even when the promise failed because someone blocked it. In conclusion, Punishing politicians for unfulfilled promises is a bad idea. It punishes leaders for dealing with surprise, stops them from doing the right things, and makes political fights worse. This is all my speech. Thank you. Please vote for us.
So I totally get where the other side is coming from. We all want politicians to keep their promises, right? But today, I want to talk about why slapping sanctions on them for unfulfilled promises isn't the kind of accountability we actually need. It sounds good on paper, but it would end up hurting our communities more than helping. First off, let's be real. Life is full of surprises and politics is no different. A politician might promise to build new parks or fix roads, but then a sudden flood hits, or the economy starts a downturn, and the money has to go to emergency help instead. That's not them being lazy. It's them doing what's needed for us in the moment. Sanctioning them for that is like punishing a teacher for not finishing a lesson because the class had a fire drill. It doesn't make sense, and it punishes people for things they can't control. Then there's a bigger problem. Sanctions have made politicians scared to try anything bold. If every big promises come from the risk of being sanctioned, they'll stop talking about big issues like climate change or better healthcare, and only making tiny, easy promises that they know they can keep. We'd end up with leaders who play it safe, not leaders who fight for real change. And that's not the kind of representation we want, is it? Worse, sanctions would turn politics into fights, not a team effort. Opposing parties would just use unfulfilled promises as an excuse to attack each other. Instead of working together on things we all care about, like better schools or safer neighborhoods, we'll get more gridlock, more bickering, and less getting things done. That's the last thing our communities need. At the end of the day, the best way to hold politicians accountable is already there. Elections. If someone doesn't deliver their promises, we can vote them out next time. That's fair. That's democratic, and it doesn't break the system to make leaders too scared to act. Sanctions sounds like a quick fix, but they're a messy, harmful one. Let's stick to what works: real democratic accountability, not punishments that hurt more than help. Thank you.
Proposition wins this debate because we guarantee accountability and restore public trust and strengthen democracy. By imposing sanctions, politicians are incentivized to fulfill their campaign promises, making elections meaningful and empowering voters. Unlike opposition's alternatives, media security, moral appeals, or recall elections, which are inconsistent, voluntary, or reactive, sanctions create systematic, enforceable, and continuous consequences. This ensures promises are credible, governance is effective, and citizens remain engaged in democratic response processes. The positive world of proposition is one of trustworthy leaders, functional institutions, responsible policymaking, whereas the opposition leaves us in a negative world of broken promises, cynicism, disengaged voters, and weak governance. And ultimately, proposition wins the comparative because it produces real measurable outcomes for citizens while addressing systematic failures that opposition cannot fix. By contrast, opposition's world tolerates dishonesty, encourages populism, and undermines democracy. Our mechanisms, transparency, electoral consequences, and legal financial penalties create a durable system of accountability, making our model superior, proactive, and beneficial to society. In short, proposition does not promise a better system, it delivers it, making politicians responsible and democracy functional. Also, opposition's reply on Whip keeps restating the claims that Prop has already refuted. As Whip speaker stated, at the end of the day, on the government side, we are the only teams who actually gave the politicians an incentive to keep their promises with the citizens, increasing trust, making a less corrupt government. Throughout our policy, when these politicians can fulfill their campaigns in less than 10 years, then they will not be able to to be a politician again. But furthermore, the hearts of citizens will choose what punishment they will get. We can achieve a stable and trusted government. So proud to propose. Thank you.